Welcome the Lord's chosen. When someone can't stop talking about you, it's not gossip. It's grief disguised as conversation. You see, there's a strange kind of madness that settles in people when they lose access to the energy that once made them feel powerful. And the chosen ones know this experience too well. The moment you walk away, certain individuals start unraveling like a thread pulled from a cheap sweater. Suddenly, your name becomes the main character in every story they tell, like an unpaid actor in their mental soap opera. They bring you up so often, you'd think you were paying rent inside their skull. Here's the truth most won't say out loud. When people keep talking about you after you've gone quiet, it's not because they care. It's because they can't heal. Psychologists even note that obsessive rumination is a form of emotional fixation, often triggered by unresolved shame or inferiority. In simple terms, they're not over you, they're over themselves because of you. And that's where the chaos begins. Your peace looks like provocation. Your success sounds like a personal insult. Your absence, a full-blown existential crisis. They don't even realize it, but every time they mention your name, they're confessing that you left a mark too deep to erase. It's funny in a dark way. The more they try to prove they're over you, the more proof they create that they're not. The whole act becomes a psychological circus. Denial wearing a clown nose, spinning lies just to distract from the ache underneath. So yes, everyone's tired of hearing them talk about you. Not because you're the problem, but because their obsession has become their identity. And as they keep spiraling, something poetic happens. What was meant to humiliate you ends up revealing them. Let's break this down, brutally, truthfully, and with zero sugarcoating. Because this isn't just gossip, it's spiritual exposure. Number one, they keep your name alive because you silenced their ego. When someone keeps bringing your name up long after you've left their world, it's not admiration, it's injury. You silenced something in them they didn't even know was screaming for validation. The truth is, some people need to feel above others to feel alive. They feed off comparison, competition, and control. You, being the chosen one, disrupted that cycle. You didn't play their game. You didn't beg for acceptance or react to their manipulation. And that silence, that quiet power, became their greatest humiliation. You didn't destroy their reputation. You destroyed their illusion of dominance. You stripped them of the role they played in their own fantasy where you were supposed to be the lesser one, the one who needed them to be relevant. But when you walked away, you proved something they can't handle, that you were never beneath them. And now, instead of admitting that truth, they keep your name alive like a ghost story they can't stop telling. Every time they talk about you, they're trying to recover the ego you unintentionally crushed. They'll twist stories, exaggerate moments, and even create new ones, all to make themselves feel like they still have control over your narrative. But deep down, every word they speak is a confession that you took away their favorite drug, attention through superiority. It's not that they hate you, it's that they hate how powerless they feel when they realize you don't care anymore. Their ego can't survive without your emotional reaction, so they keep trying to drag your name into conversations, hoping it'll pull you back into their storm. But the irony is brutal. The more they speak, the more they expose their insecurity. What they call truth about you is really therapy for them. So let them talk. Their words are proof that your silence worked. You silenced their ego so effectively that it now speaks in circles, trying and failing to find peace without you. Number two, their mind is stuck in the moment you outgrew them. Some people never truly move on because their minds are frozen in the exact moment you left a mark they couldn't erase. They keep replaying it over and over, not because you matter more than anyone else, but because that moment exposed a weakness they refused to confront. When you outgrew them, you didn't just step ahead. You shattered the story they were telling themselves about who they were in your life. And now they're trapped, living in a mental loop where your absence becomes a constant accusation. Every conversation they have about you is an attempt to freeze time, to pull you back into the role they wanted you to stay in. They remember the gestures, the words, the situations, twisting them in their minds to make it seem like you should still be within their control. They think if they talk about you enough, replay your past in every detail, they can reclaim what they lost. But what they don't understand is that your growth doesn't fit into their mental cage. You moved on, evolved, and left them in the echo of your presence, where nothing they say or do can reach you. Their obsession isn't random. It's a reaction to the fact that they can't reconcile who you were with who you've become. They're angry, frustrated, and sometimes scared because your progress highlights their stagnation. Every time they bring you up, it's like they're trying to force themselves out of their own failure, using you as a benchmark they can't meet. They talk, they complain, they fabricate, but deep down they're just trying to rewrite a moment they never got over. You aren't the problem in their story. You're the reality that refuses to conform to their illusions. Their mind is stuck because you moved on with purpose, leaving them to replay a defeat that only exists in their imagination. The more they obsess, the more they show that your departure wasn't just a loss for them. It was the moment they realized you were never theirs to contain. Your life moved forward, and theirs is paused, rewinding the very second they failed to hold on to you. Number 3, they confuse closure with control. Some people talk about you endlessly because they believe that by controlling the narrative, they can finally find closure. What they don't realize is that closure is never about controlling someone else. It's about accepting what already happened and moving on. But for them, acceptance is impossible. They think if they can twist your story, if they can dissect your actions and interpret every word you ever said, they can somehow reclaim what they lost. That desperate need to control the past masks their inability to deal with reality, and it keeps them trapped in a loop that only makes them look more unstable. Every word they speak about you is an attempt to rewrite history in their favor. They want the world to see you through their lens, to validate their perspective, to make it seem like you owe them an explanation. They believe that by dissecting your choices and your life, they can finally feel like the situation ended on their terms. But life doesn't work that way. You can't hand someone control over you just because they demand it, and no amount of talking, gossiping, or complaining can ever change that. Their fixation is proof of their failure to accept your freedom. The more they try to manage your image or influence the way people see you, the more they reveal that they are still caught in a state of emotional imprisonment. They don't see that control is never closure. It's a temporary illusion that fades the moment you continue living your life unapologetically. Their attempts to dominate your narrative are just reminders to everyone else and to themselves that you've moved on, while they remain stuck chasing a shadow that doesn't exist anymore. By confusing closure with control, they trap themselves in a cycle of obsession and frustration. Every conversation about you, every rumor, every distorted story is a signal of their inability to release you from their mind. And in their attempt to dominate what they can never truly own, they end up exposing more of their insecurity than yours. The irony is sharp and unavoidable. The tighter they try to hold on, the more it shows that you already escaped. Number 4, their reputation became the price of their bitterness. There comes a point where bitterness stops being an emotion and starts becoming a personality. That's exactly what happens to people who can't stop talking about you. At first, they think they're setting the record straight. warning others or exposing you. But over time, their obsession stops sounding like truth and starts sounding like trouble. The more they speak your name, the less credible they become, because people eventually notice the pattern. One person always bitter, always dramatic, always reliving the same story. Their need to make you look bad ends up doing the opposite. It stains their own image. Bitterness has a sound to it, a certain tone, a certain desperation that no one can fake for long. It leaks through their words, through their facial expressions, through the way they emphasize details that don't even matter. And people pick up on that. They may not say anything, but they start stepping back quietly. They start realizing that the one doing all the talking is the one still stuck in the past. The more they try to make you the villain, the more they paint themselves as the unstable one. That's how obsession turns into self-exposure. They never realize that reputation is fragile. It's not something you lose all at once. It crumbles slowly, piece by piece, every time someone witnesses your bitterness and chooses not to trust it. Their words begin to sound less like truth and more like confession. They reveal the envy, the regret, the wound they never healed. What they meant to use against you becomes their own undoing. And while they spiral, trying to maintain control over your image, you rise quietly, untouched by their noise. That contrast speaks louder than their words ever could. In the end, their reputation falls, not because you fought them, but because their bitterness demanded an audience. And eventually, even the audience got tired of watching the performance. Number 5, you became their spiritual scapegoat. When people can't keep up with your growth, they start looking for someone to blame. And more often than not, that someone becomes you. You didn't ask to be their target. You simply moved forward while they stayed stuck in the weight of their own unresolved emotions. Your progress forced them to face parts of themselves they've been hiding from the world. Guilt for past mistakes, envy of what they never achieved, shame over failures they refused to fix. Instead of doing the hard work, they chose the easier path, projecting all of it onto you and calling it truth. Every word they speak, every story they twist, is a reflection of their own spiritual battles. You weren't the problem. You were the mirror. By thriving, you made them uncomfortable because their denial couldn't survive next to your clarity. Their constant criticism, gossip, and obsession are nothing more than attempts to convince themselves that your success, peace, and growth are undeserved. It's easier for them to see you as flawed than to admit the flaw resides within their own life. This projection isn't subtle. It leaks into every interaction, every post, every conversation. You become the scapegoat for feelings they've been ignoring for years. And ironically, the more they try to teach or expose you, the more they expose themselves. You can see the pattern clearly. They're running from their own shadows, and you just happen to be standing in the light. The harsh reality is that being their scapegoat is a compliment, disguised as an attack. It shows that you're moving where they can't. You've entered a realm of emotional freedom and spiritual alignment that highlights the cracks in their own foundation. They'll talk, they'll fabricate, they'll obsess, but all they're really doing is revealing how powerless they feel in the face of your growth. And the more they project, the clearer it becomes. You've already won the part of life they refuse to fight for within themselves. Number 6, they don't miss you. They miss the power they had when you doubted yourself. The truth about people who can't stop talking about you isn't that they miss you. They miss the influence they once held over you. They thrived on the moments when you questioned yourself, when their words, actions, or judgments made you second-guess your worth. That was their fuel. That was their identity. Their sense of power wasn't built on genuine connection or respect. It was built on your hesitation, your doubt, and your emotional response. Once you detached, once you stopped feeding into their narrative, they lost the source of their dominance. Their obsession isn't born from love or hate, it's born from withdrawal. When you stop responding, when your peace no longer aligns with their chaos, they realize that the throne they claimed in your mind was always imaginary. They were powerful only when you allowed it, and now, stripped of your energy, they feel exposed, small, and irrelevant. Every time they bring you up, it's a desperate attempt to reclaim that lost power. They try to remind themselves, and anyone who will listen, that they still hold a piece of your story, that you were once under their influence. But what they don't see is that their obsession only proves they no longer have control. The irony is brutal. The louder they speak, the clearer it becomes that their power was never real, and their identity was only as strong as the doubt you carried for them. They fail to understand that detachment isn't abandonment, it's liberation. You moved beyond the dynamics that once gave them significance, and now the person who thought they could shape your reality is left circling around your name, trying to grasp a power that evaporated the moment you stopped participating. Their fixation isn't about you at all. It's about the void you left behind in their ego, a void they can never fill, no matter how much they talk. Your freedom became their mirror, and it hurts them more than any absence ever could. Number 7, you're their unfinished sentence. Some people stay stuck on you not because of love, but because you represent the part of their story they couldn't complete. You became the interruption in their illusion of control, the chapter that didn't end the way they wanted. They thought they could manipulate the outcome, rewrite your value, or humble you into staying small. But instead, you outgrew the plot. You walked away mid-scene, leaving them hanging with a sentence that never found its period. And now, your name lingers in their mouth because saying it is the only way they can pretend the story isn't over. You represent the what if they can't stop replaying. The what if they stayed? What if I'd won? What if I hadn't pushed them too far? You embody the version of their life where they still felt significant. And since that version no longer exists, they try to resurrect it through conversation, gossip, analysis, pity, anything that keeps you alive in their narrative. You became the emotional bookmark in their timeline, the reminder of how they failed to finish what they started. There's something painfully poetic about it. They can't find closure because closure requires honesty, and honesty would mean admitting you were never the problem. They can't move on, not because you did something wrong, but because you did something rare. You ended the story on your own terms. You refused to let their ego write the final line. So now, every time they bring you up, they're not talking about you. They're talking about the ending they never got. They fill the silence with your name because it reminds them of the power they lost. You became the sentence they keep trying to finish, but can't, because the author of that story, you, has already moved on to another book. Their obsession isn't about nostalgia, it's about unfinished business. And what tortures them most is knowing that the only one who could give them closure has already chosen peace over conversation. Number 8, you shattered their psychological hierarchy. Some people structure their entire sense of self around being above others. Their confidence isn't earned, it's borrowed from how small they make everyone else feel. They rank the world like a ladder, and anyone who challenges their position is treated as a threat. When you move through life on your own terms, rising without their permission or approval, you didn't just disrupt their expectations. You demolished the ladder they'd built so carefully. Your growth became evidence that their authority was fragile, that their superiority was nothing more than a fragile construct built on comparison and control. This is why they can't stop talking about you. Each mention is an attempt to reconstruct that They spin stories, analyze your actions, and try to belittle your achievements, hoping someone, anyone, will validate their need to feel above you again. Every word they speak is a patch on a wound they don't want to acknowledge, that their confidence was never about skill or substance, but about controlling the narrative. The more they obsess, the more obvious it becomes that their power was never real. They believed they could dictate your place in the world, but your independence exposed the emptiness of their superiority. Now they cling to your name like a shield, a way to pretend the hierarchy still exists, even as it crumbles beneath them. And the irony is relentless. In trying to rebuild themselves through you, they're revealing exactly how weak their foundation was. Every insult, every gossip, every exaggerated story is a desperate act of repair. Your rise forced them to confront that their self-esteem was borrowed, and talking about you endlessly is the only way they can even imagine reclaiming it. You didn't need to fight or prove anything. By simply existing, growing, and moving forward, you shattered a world built on fragile dominance. And now, their obsession is the confession. Proof that the ladder they counted on to feel superior has collapsed, and you are the reason they're left scrambling to piece it back together. Number 9, their obsession is their punishment. There's a strange kind of justice that unfolds when someone can't stop talking about you. The same mouth that tried to curse your name ends up trapped by it. What began as gossip slowly turns into an involuntary ritual, a haunting loop where they repeat your story so often it starts to consume them. They think they're spreading rumors, but in reality they're spreading reminders of how much power they've lost. The universe has a quiet, poetic way of balancing things. It lets them obsess until their words become their own prison. At first it feels like control. They think mentioning you keeps them relevant, that by talking about your life, they still have access to it. But over time, the obsession changes form. Their words lose venom. The excitement fades. What's left is compulsion, a need to bring you up even when it doesn't make sense anymore. They've tied your name to their identity so tightly that silence now feels like erasure. They can't let go, because if they stop talking about you, they'd have to face how empty their life feels without that fixation. That's the punishment. Their obsession feeds itself. Every story, every lie, every attempt to drag you down only strengthens the very energy they're trying to escape. The same name they use to mock you becomes the name that exposes them. People start noticing the pattern, how you never respond, yet they never stop. The contrast reveals everything. Their constant need to speak of you becomes a living confession that you've moved on, and they haven't. You didn't have to seek revenge or clear your name. Life handled it for you. The universe turned their bitterness into their own undoing. Now, every time they speak, they reinforce the truth they tried to bury, that you've already healed, and they're still living in the echo of your absence. That's the poetry of karma. They became the keeper of the name they wanted to destroy. Number 10, you trigger their need to feel significant. For some people, your existence has become their only evidence that they ever mattered. When they hear your name, it stings, not because they hate you, but because it reminds them that your story kept going without them. You became a marker of time, a living reminder that they were once part of something that made them feel important. Now that you've moved on, that sense of importance is gone, and they don't know how to exist without it. So they talk about you, not to attack, but to survive the growing emptiness that comes with irrelevance. Their reaction isn't random, it's instinctive. When you outgrow someone who defined themselves through you, it leaves a void in their identity. They don't know who they are without the tension, without the back and forth, without your attention feeding their emotional worth. Every mention of your name is an unconscious attempt to feel alive again. They say your name like a lifeline because without it, they'd have to face how invisible they've become. Deep down, It's not you they're after. It's the validation you used to provide. They can't recreate that energy with anyone else because it wasn't just about connection, it was about significance. You represented a mirror that made them feel like they mattered. Now that you're gone, they feel like a background character in their own story. That's why your name still lingers on their lips. It's the only way they can prove to themselves and to others that they were once relevant in someone's life who rose beyond them. And that's the painful beauty of your growth. It exposes who only felt valuable through your vulnerability. You stop needing their approval, and in doing so, you quietly erase their sense of importance. Every time your name surfaces, it scratches the wound of that realization. They talk about you because silence would mean admitting they've faded into the past, and you've become proof that they no longer hold meaning in a world that no longer needs their validation. Number 11, they keep talking because silence would force self-reflection. Some people can't stop speaking about you because silence would demand a truth they're not ready to face. Every mention of your name is a shield, a distraction, a way to avoid looking inward. If they allowed themselves to be quiet, they'd have to admit that you were never the problem, that the real issue was their own flaws, insecurities, and unresolved anger. Facing that reality takes courage, effort, and humility. And for many, it's easier to keep talking than to rebuild themselves from the inside out. Their obsession becomes a protective ritual. By keeping you at the center of their attention, they avoid confronting uncomfortable truths about their choices, failures, and missed opportunities. Every story, every gossip, every complaint acts as a temporary bandage over a wound they refuse to acknowledge. They recycle old grievances and twist memories, all in an attempt to maintain a sense of control. In doing so, they externalize blame and keep the focus on you, rather than taking responsibility for the chaos in their own lives. The irony is unmistakable. The more they speak, the more obvious it becomes that their life is unbalanced. Their words reveal frustration, envy, and insecurity, while trying to portray dominance and righteousness. They talk about you not because you occupy their mind in a healthy way, but because their mind is too weak to handle the reflection your absence forces. Every utterance about you is proof that the real battle isn't with you, it's with themselves. You, on the other hand, exist quietly, free of the weight of their obsession. Your detachment highlights their internal struggle and makes their chatter louder, more frantic, and more revealing. They can continue to speak all they want, but it changes nothing about your life. Their voice becomes a mirror showing exactly where they failed to grow and how talking about you endlessly is nothing more than a confession of their own unresolved self. Their words are their punishment, and their silence would be the cure, one they refuse to take. Number 12, they think they're exposing you, but they're documenting their decline. The more they talk about you, the more they reveal what's really going on inside them. They believe they're exposing your flaws, tearing down your reputation, setting the record straight. But in reality, they're keeping a public record of their own downfall. Each word they speak becomes a timestamp in their emotional diary, written not in truth but in bitterness, jealousy, and denial. The story they think they're telling about you slowly transforms into an autobiography of their insecurity. People start to notice. At first, listeners might sympathize, believing their side of things. But over time, the pattern shows. You stay silent, you move forward, you grow. Meanwhile, they can't stop bringing you up, even when no one's asking. Their tone gets sharper, their stories more exaggerated, their reasons less convincing. It stops sounding like truth and starts sounding like obsession. What was meant to be proof of your wrongs becomes evidence of their unraveling. Every conversation about you is a confession they don't realize they're making. They reveal how much energy they've wasted keeping your name alive. They expose how deeply your absence bothers them. Their bitterness bleeds through every detail, and no matter how carefully they try to disguise it, the world hears the same thing: pain that never healed. The spotlight they're trying to shine on you only ends up illuminating their own cracks. The decline doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual, a slow erosion of credibility, dignity, and peace. The more they speak, the less they're believed. The more they try to destroy your image, the smaller theirs becomes. And by the time they realize that everyone stopped listening for your name and started analyzing their behavior, it's already too late. They've written their own downfall line by line, thinking they were crafting your downfall story. What they called exposure was really self-exposure, and the ending they wanted for you became their own. Number 13, they mistook spiritual consequence for coincidence. There's a quiet order to the universe that most people underestimate, a balance that never misses a beat. When someone constantly lies about you, slanders your name, or tries to destroy your character, they may think they're getting away with it. They laugh, they brag, they feel untouchable. But over time, things in their life start to slow down. Doors that once opened easily now stick. Relationships crumble. Opportunities vanish. Energy turns stagnant. And while they blame bad luck, timing, or people turning against them, what they're really experiencing is spiritual consequence. They mistake that slow unraveling for coincidence because their ego won't allow them to connect the dots. They can't comprehend that speaking against someone who's divinely protected carries a cost. Every false word, every manipulative action, every petty attempt to twist the truth becomes a seed planted against themselves. The universe doesn't punish out of spite. It simply mirrors what you put out. When they tried to curse you, they cursed their own flow. When they tried to block you, they blocked their own path. The chosen ones don't need to fight back, because the energy does it for them. What was meant for harm transforms into evidence of divine alignment. You stay blessed, covered, and progressing, while they keep running into invisible walls, wondering why nothing seems to move forward. That's not karma being cruel, it's truth correcting imbalance. You can't poison the soil and expect the same ground to grow your blessings, and yet they'll never fully see it for what it is. Pride blinds them from recognizing that their downfall didn't begin with bad choices. It began with bad intentions. They mistook consequence for coincidence because it's easier to deny divine order than to admit fault. But the universe keeps score quietly, and it always settles the debt. What they spoke against you returned home to them, and what they meant to destroy only strengthened your protection. Number 14, you live rent-free. Because you represent freedom, they'll never touch. They don't talk about you because they still care. They talk about you because you represent everything they'll never have the courage to become. Your freedom burns them in ways they can't explain. You broke away from their grip, their influence, their emotional games, and instead of crumbling without their approval, you flourished. That kind of liberation terrifies people who depend on control to feel secure. You stopped playing by their rules, and now your peace, the very thing they mocked, has become their obsession. You live rent-free in their mind because your existence is proof that manipulation loses its power once awareness takes over. You didn't just walk away. You broke the system they used to survive. They can't understand how you did it, how you can wake up every day without their opinion shaping your decisions, how you can be calm while they're still restless. They replay your choices, not because they miss you, but because they're studying what freedom looks like, the kind they can't touch without dismantling the false world they've built around themselves. Your peace insults their chaos. Your detachment exposes their dependence. They keep your name alive, hoping to distort your story, but deep down, they're fascinated by how you managed to do what they couldn't. Free yourself completely. And that's why you'll always occupy space in their head. You're not just a memory, you're a reminder of a different reality. One where self-respect and peace rule instead of power games and ego battles. They can't stop talking because silence would mean acceptance. And accepting your freedom would mean admitting they're still trapped. So they keep running their mouths, trying to make sense of something they'll never experience firsthand. You're not their obsession by choice, you're their proof that control was never power, freedom was. And that's the one thing they'll never be able to own, no matter how many times they say your name. Conclusion. At the core of every obsession, every whispered story, every repeated name, lies a truth most people refuse to face. The one they talk about is never the problem. You, the chosen one, became the mirror they couldn't look into, without shattering the illusions they'd built around themselves. Every word they speak, every rumor they spread, every desperate attempt to control your narrative is nothing more than a reflection of their insecurities, their failures, and the parts of themselves they've refused to heal. Your silence and detachment are not weaknesses, they are revelations. Your growth, your peace, and your freedom expose the cracks in their foundation, and your mere existence highlights the difference between a life lived in fear and a life lived in purpose. They think they're exposing you, but in truth, they are documenting their own unraveling. They believe that by speaking your name endlessly, they regain power, but all they do is reveal the hollowness of their ego, their obsession, their bitterness, their envy. All of it circles back to the undeniable fact that you have moved on, evolved, and reclaimed what they never had the capacity to understand. True liberation. Every attempt to manipulate your story becomes evidence of their spiritual, emotional, and psychological stagnation, while you continue to rise untouched by their chaos. And here lies the ultimate paradox. The louder they try to control your narrative, the clearer it becomes that their energy has no hold over you. You are untouchable not because you fight, not because you argue, but because you live in alignment with your truth. Your life is your message. Your peace is your power. And the very obsession they feed proves that they are still trapped in a world they can never escape. A world where your freedom reigns while they remain ensnared by their own unresolved struggles. If you've resonated with this, if it's given you clarity, empowerment, or an awakening to your own growth and peace, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep insights. Hit the like button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with anyone who needs to hear the truth about people who can't stop talking about them. Stand in your power, stay untouchable, and let your life continue to speak louder than any obsession ever could. Stay blessed always.